Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Khalil Doheny. I'm the Senior Content Marketing Manager from Digital Niche Agency. Today, we have Charles, CEO and founder of AtomBeam. Charles, how are you doing today?
Good. Well, how are you?
Awesome. And then we have Nakeeb Akhtar from Crowdpoint. Nakeeb, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Khalil. Thanks for having me.
Of course. This is going to be a wonderful webinar we have going on today. Charles, do you want to kind of give, the lay of the land of what we can expect from today's webinar?
Yeah. So first, I want to apologize for any confusion about it being about space. This isn't about space. This is about really this concept that we've come up with our partners and at Crowdpoint, and that's why Nidab is here. We are going to create something that will blow you away. It's just, there's nothing like it in the universe. You will see when we talk about it how big a deal it is. So that's the prime subject of today. I want to mention one more thing though, because lots of you have been following the space stuff and everything. So just before we get started on this, a quick update. So Lockheed Martin has agreed to work with us and support our work with the Space Force. And that's kind of like not a minor thing, being a $70 billion company, offering up their facilities and engineers and everything to help us get things done there is, a pretty big deal. So anyway, there's a quick update. Also, well, I should say now, well, I'll take you to the main event. But before we do that, Nidab, would you please walk us through sort of like who you are, a little on Crowdpoint, the blockchain that you have, please.
Yeah, Charles, thank you so much for that introduction, and congratulations on the Lockheed strategic initiative. That's pretty compelling and exciting. So congrats to you and the entire AtomBeam team. So Crowdpoint, well, first off, my name is Nidab Akhtar. I'm co-founder, president, and chief operating officer of Crowdpoint. We launched in 2020, and we're a digital platform provider focused on one key thing, which is enabling open, honest, stable markets centered around the human identity. So what we really focus on is data privacy and data protection. And in order to accomplish the foregoing, we sought out to build a decentralized and distributed cryptographic cloud. So essentially what that means is we build infrastructure for Web3 utilization, but because we're focused on the data protection side, what we really focus on solving is the data sharing issue with working with disparate data sets, systems, vendors, and ecosystems, right? So what Crowdpoint and Web3 focuses on is ensuring that, look, if you have an ecosystem of various participants, they have obviously all their own data. Well, when you have a distributed cloud or a decentralized cloud, you can pull data and real-time insight, intelligence, etc., from this kind of joint structured database. And that's where Crowdpoint really comes in, is that we focus on the custodian side of data as well as assets. So here's what I mean by that. We have built an ecosystem of data rails and payment rails. So on the payment rail side, we have some neobanks and exchanges that are part of our ecosystem. So we provide merchant processing, escrow services, deposit accounts, etc., within our ecosystem. Crowdpoint is the technology partner for these neobanks and providing the Web3 infrastructure to deliver these payment solutions. Now, on the data rail side, we built infrastructure to power e-commerce websites, primarily e-commerce, but a number of other applications that we'll talk about later in this webinar. But what we've done is provide the front end development, the middle layer, as well as the back end for running an e-commerce store. So a complete end-to-end solution. So what we're doing with that is taking, like, let's say your alt data from a transaction, structuring that, putting it against a taxonomy, which we happen to use the GICS standard, which is the Global Industrial Classification Standard. It's the same taxonomy that NYSE, the New York Stock Exchange, S&P 500, et cetera, utilize. And so we're taking that alt data, as well as other consumer data. We protect that with our cryptographic protection, as well as AtomBeam and its amazing compaction technology, to say, look, we're gonna protect and limit the or manage and control the use of sensitive data, like let's say, for example, personally identifiable information. We'll report on a public blockchain everything that we want to be public, but on that same blockchain, we compact what's sensitive data using AtomBeam's amazing technology. And so we'll compact that. So essentially we deliver the world's first public-private blockchain all in one. It's a hybrid blockchain. So we'll dig into that a little further in this webinar, but that's kind of a snapshot of what we're doing is deriving real-time insights from alt data garnered from commercial markets as well as capital markets.
Yep. Thanks. Well, yeah, I mean, that
my pleasure.
Goes to what it's really comes down to is in terms of like the meaning of your technology is that it's like blockchain generally, right? It's about storing transactions fundamentally in a way that can't be subsequently altered without everybody knowing about it, right? Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we draw a comparison between the standard approach to blockchain and what you guys are doing, talk about the speed, talk about the additional capabilities of being sort of a database that uses blockchain. You know, what's the implication of that for just everybody who is a potential user, companies, governments?
Yeah, great question, Charles. So there's a few things that are the implications. Number one is let's say the size of data or volume of data that you can store on one block. So typically on the blockchain, one block stores about a megabyte of data. When we compact that, we can get 20 to 40 megabytes of data on one block. So you can store a lot more data in a payload, obviously, because you're not sending all the data. It's just a hash representation using the compaction technology, right? So instead of sending the payload, we'll instead send a hash or a polynomial to rebuild the data on the other end. Right now, because it's distributed and decentralized on this cloud, now and that code book is only known to the other nodes or operators on the distributed blockchain, right? It's highly secure. It's immutable. Cannot be manipulated without majority consensus on the blockchain. So what that does is first on the data volume, it improves that tremendously. Also speeds. Our blockchain right now, we're in our testnet deployment, Charles, as you know, we're garnering about 1.5 million transactions per second. Now, by comparison, here's what that means. Like there are companies like Solana, for example, which is one of the fastest blockchains that's in the market right now. That generally does about 50 to 75,000 transactions per second. So as you can see, we're tremendously faster because some of the dual strategies that we put together in our architecture using not only some of our proprietary technology, but combining it with compaction. So let's say one of the things that we truly solve, as I mentioned before, we build these markets centered around the human identity. So let's say when you think about current blockchains and the landscape, and even Web 2 solutions, when you talk about sharing consumer data or your sensitive private data on a legacy system or a traditional database, that it's a pretty static share, right? Like when you share data, I will make a copy of a file, I'll email it to you, attach it, etc., and send it to you. So there's no like trust in the fidelity of the data or tracking of the lineage of the data. With our solution, what we can do is keep all that data, quote unquote, on chain. So what we're delivering is digital rights management. Okay, and as I mentioned, when we have a public-private blockchain all in one, here's what we could do. For example, let's say we have an e-commerce transaction and we are generating the alt data. Like Khalil will go to one of our websites, close the transaction, after he swipes his credit card or enters his credit card into our payment rail. And Charles, you'll see on your back end sold one, I don't know, sweatshirt or hat or whatever, whatever item it is. We'll in real time index that data and put it on the ledger, on our public ledger. So I could go on to our server and look onto our public server, sorry, and look to see, all right, I see now that this store has generated X number of sales in a day, or we just sold another hat. This company is an attractive company. Okay, but what we're protecting or keeping private, because it's compacted on the same blockchain, is the private data. So like Khalil's identity, his email address, his phone number, right? That information is sensitive and private. We want to keep secure. But any public data like buying habits, market factors, etc., we can report onto a blockchain and generate indices, share that alt data with other vendors, with advertisers, and etc., in order to help drive additional sales, liquidity, etc., in that market.
Yeah, thank you. So just in practical terms, as I understand it, and one thing to mention here is that Sean Brem, who was supposed to be on, is in Egypt and incommunicado, apparently. Not good enough internet there. So we might end up doing a follow-up here. But the fundamental is, my understanding of the combined product is you might have one file, and that file would be in some parts compacted and in some parts not compacted. So I might, just in practical terms, I might have my own code book, and my own code book says it gives me access to everything that's related, that's my stuff. So it might be medical records, it might be my social security number, or how much money I have in a bank or something. That stuff is protected by codebook. So we're using the codebook there not only to reduce the size of the data, we're also making it into a secure access, identity focused thing, so that I've got my codebook. I know everything that's in this transaction, as you pointed out, like buying a sweater. But I don't have to reveal any information I don't to somebody else. Why? And how do I do that? Because some of it's encoded in your code book and some of it isn't. And so given that, you can have a file that has a lot of protected information that's reduced in size, a lot of other information that isn't reduced in size, but needs to be publicly available. And so you combine all that, you'd say, okay, let's take another step back and say, in the global, when you think about the bigger implications of all this, it comes down to being able to say, there's a need to know, and a need to know only is we pour our information out all over the place. Here's who I am. Here's my credit card number. Here's whatever. All this other information is floating around there, and you're handing it out right and left, and it exists forever, wherever it is. The idea here fundamentally is we take that back. We say to the individual whose information this is, your data is protected, and you're the only one who has access to it unless you give permission to somebody. And you're only giving them permission for what they actually have to know. And what Sean said the other way was really interesting. He was saying, okay, if I were being carded to a bar, like I want to buy a drink. And what does the bartender need to know? Does he need to know everything on my driver's license, my name, my address, whether I wear glasses or whatever? None of that stuff is his business. Only, are you of the drinking age or not? And therefore, he would just get a little QR code. The QR code would be protected information is protected, and the only thing he would get is a green check. Yes, this person is drinking age. So what you're doing in essence is you're saying, I'm protecting all the individual information, all the little nodes of information relating to this person, this business, this whatever, in a way that gives full access to anybody that you want to, but gives no access except on a need-to-know basis to anybody else. And it's a way of saying, how do we end all this pirating of identity? How do we stop this flood of crud that keeps happening to people and to businesses and all this other stuff? It is by individually giving access to information only when someone needs it and only for the time that they need it. Other than that, it's gone. And it's your protected stuff. And that is the miracle of this combined product, because you can only do this, what we're talking about. So if you have the Vogon, your blockchain technology, which really, because it's not just a blockchain, it's not just a bunch of transactions stored, it's a way of accessing those transactions in a way that's fast, that is capable of constant movement, constant access. You have instant access to everything, and it's compacted, and that makes it faster and also allows you to secure individual pieces of the data, right? And so the fundamental is here, this is addressing the whole world's problem of privacy of information.
Yeah. So the industry applications for this are pretty tremendous. Like, let's say if you look at the healthcare industry and HIPAA, right? Obviously, there's a lot of efficiencies and synergies that can be deployed within the healthcare industry. Let's say in the banking industry, as I mentioned, that's tremendous as well. Then you can do things like, let's say with the recent chaos at FTX, right? And how they had the CEO had a backdoor to their traditional database and accessed, access funds, etc. What you could do with a compacted smart contract is, like we're saying, set up different permission levels on what data can be accessed, what data can be altered or can't be altered, etc. You can set up different permission levels depending on your clearance, right? And your role within an organization, even one singular enterprise, as well as, let's say, an ecosystem of different participants, i.e., a joint database. So then you have applications like this within, let's say, the defense sector. The defense sector has tremendous application of a solution like this, where you can again protect classified information depending on your clearance level. And Charles, you may have higher clearance than me, and so you'll see different information where I may see just a bunch of black, redacted data, right? And so I know you come from the defense sector, so I thought that may be a good segue. Perhaps you can hit a little more on the potential applications of this in the defense side.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about it this way, you think, okay, how does information protected in the government? And it's really by fundamentally encryption, right? And so you'd say, okay, how if someone hacks into your system and someone cracks your encryption, and everybody's afraid that could happen with quantum and so forth, and it's a big topic in intelligence right now, especially NSA. But that question of how do you break an encryption and what happens if you do, really, is coming to talk more about what happens if you do. And if you do hack into somebody's encryption and get access to somebody's information, you suddenly have access to everything in that database. And it doesn't matter if this is protected by that particular piece, that particular, it's called in intelligence information, it's called SCI, it's special compartmented information. And that means that I don't need and therefore don't have access to this set of information, but it's protected by passwords. And it's not a different encryption generally. And so if I get access and hack into your encrypted information, now suddenly I see everything on the planet. If you were using this new product that we have, not only is it ultra secure because of the blockchain, it's also individualized because of the compaction and the additional security that we add. So if you were to put those together, you would say, okay, welcome new guy here at NSA. We're not going to give you access to everything on the planet. Here's your code word. Here's your code book or set of code books. And this is giving you access only to the information that you need to have to do your job. And so the consequence of all that is, it's the same concept as compartmentalized information, compartmentalized intelligence that is applied in a digital way. So I take away your ability to, if you hack a code book, okay, hard to do, really hard to do, but say you did, you'd only have access to the information that was encoded with that code book, not everything.
Yeah.
And that applies to
it goes a little
and all kinds of things. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and Charles, on that notion, you can go a little deeper on it as well. Let's say you add in the sharding element of blockchain, right, which we'll have in Vogon 2.0, which we expect to release early next year. So Vogon 2.0, what we could do is, let's say you hack into a code book, you hack into one server. Well, congratulations, you get 1/1 billionth of the data that you're trying to do, because now it's decentralized and sharded across a ton of other code books, a ton of other nodes. Then you add in the layering element as well. Let's say you cracked one hash layer. Great. Well, that's layer one. Now you have layer two, which is protected by another layer of compaction and code books, right? And so the applications between sharding and layering the compactions is you could virtually create a impossible to hack wallet, impossible to hack data store and ledger technology. So it's pretty compelling when you think about what can be what next iterations of our product will look like.
Yeah, well, and you gotta think too. And this is a deep question. I don't know if you can answer it. We probably need Sean on to really answer it.
Yeah,
he's the super genius.
Yeah.
Anyway, but in terms of being able to resist quantum, a quantum hack, and I've asked the same question of our resident genius, Josh Cooper, and he's like, saying, I don't think quantum is there yet, and it's really hard for me to say and stuff. But some of the stuff that we can do is, I think, potentially quantum resistant. I don't want to promise something necessarily. Do you have thoughts on that? I mean, with respect to the sharding and,
Yeah, I'll let, obviously, we'll have a follow-up webinar with Sean to talk about this, but we've touched in the past about being theoretically quantum proof, because of course you could always, I think hack on a hardware level, but from a software side, what I've been told is the way our consensus mechanism works and our nodes work is our blockchain's nodes are kind of self-aware. So because they kind of take a cellular mitosis or a biological approach to how they handle data. So let's say they sense an attack, or they sense that more data is being like a brute force attack, for example, a ton of more data is being added to or overloaded on a node. That consensus group will then split. Right, and so now you have a code book that's split, and it's created another one. So the sharding and the different cryptographic layers will continue to split and split and split. So theoretically, let's say a quantum layer breaks one, or quantum attack will break one layer. Well, great. Now it's split into different sub layers. So
It's
my
intense,
understanding is that, yeah,
very hard.
there is a lot of defense we can put together for this. So
Yep. But yeah, but you know, so we'll leave that for the next one to really answer that question. So, you know, one
yeah.
thing is, let's talk. So this is all very nice and
Mhm.
sounds like great theory. Talk about like where you're actually, you know,
Sure.
some of those things that we've talked about and some of those interesting countries.
Yeah. Yeah. So first I'll hit on the neobanking side, and then I'll talk about some of the applications we're looking at around the world. So let's say for a very near term rollout of our combined product, we focus first, since we are a company that's dedicated first and foremost to protecting the human identity. So where we're really implementing this combined technology is first in our wallet, right? So our wallet, which is we have our neobank partners, which are sponsored by a U.S. bank. So we're not a blockchain that has banks in foreign nations. We are completely U.S. regulated. We follow with the SEC, as well as partnered with American Bankers Association banks and members of FDIC. So again, this is relevant because of let's say all of the chaos and speculation because of FTX and the collapse and or market correction occurring in that space. So when you have a compaction protected and a Vogon enabled wallet, right? Your data, your assets are hyper secure. So that's a product in a use case of compaction that we're rolling out very soon here. So you're going to see our wallet, our beta tests are being done right now. So we're rolling out our universal wallet later this year, as well as expanding upon it in Q1. So you'll see that. Then we have had, as you know, Charles, discussions with ports, with exchanges, not just on the security side, or not crypto exchanges, like sophisticated securities exchanges, as well as commodities exchanges that are very interested in deploying our combined technology, where we're actually going to power, let's say, for example, we're in discussions with some seaports right now. So let's say we're taking sensitive data like bill of lading data, other alt data that we're garnering in live feeds from the seaports and the various shipping containers around that are being serviced through the port. Well, we'll take all the alt data that we have access to from these ships from the port. Structure that data, again, compact and keep sensitive whatever data is sensitive, but build some indices and forecast that will drive, let's say, central bank bonds, right? And so what we can do with this is really, like I said, create and deliver some real-time intelligence that will move liquidity in primary as well as secondary markets. And the reason why compaction and blockchain is important is because you can trust the source of the data. You can look at where it originated. You can see that it's never been manipulated because you can track the lineage of that through through our public ledger. And then again, if you have the requisite privileges to unpack the code book, you can look at data on the private blockchain layer as well. So again, the applications
so that means
are.
Let's just, sorry to interrupt, but it means
No, that's okay.
a port or say
Mhm.
the Suez Canal. So you have ships going by, they've got stuff in them, and how would you use this combined product in that context? That is to say, how in a practical way does that help the country, the port, the whatever it is?
Yeah. So some of the discussions we're having right now is like, let's say, first on these containers, you have a ton of IoT sensors right now. Those IoT sensors will track things like, again, help. There's been some examples of, let's say, clearing like a consumer good through customs, because you can again track the lineage of that data. Well, if you are reporting real-time market intelligence to, let's say investors, Investors will look at that alternative data and say, I can trust this. I see movement in the market. Now I can speculate. Let's say on a futures market, you can speculate on derivatives, right? That makes it compelling. If you're the port, let's say you're trying to renovate or expand your port, you need capital. So what you would do is issue some tokenized securities or bonds to investors around the world. Okay, and say these bonds are tied to this exclusive indice that we're pulling from Bogon and Crowdpoint and AtomBeam's combined data solution. Okay, what we're doing then is tying these central bank bonds or corporate bonds to this alternative data. You will access that data from this particular exchange. You'll see these instruments available on this exclusive exchange as well, and then trade those instruments. So it's like Charles, you come from the bond market as well, right? With your time on Wall Street, and so this is getting some really interesting data that will help drive, in our opinion. And our thesis is drive liquidity in these markets, help companies, governments, entrepreneurs, etc., access much more efficiently available capital. So instead of going to debt finance, sell equity, bring on private equity, VCs, you can now equity crowdfund your capital, much like our respective companies are doing, and access more efficient capital. One of the hardest things to do in the private capital market space is to access high quality data on companies. It's number one, it's hard to benchmark against comparables. It's hard to find sector specific or niche data, right? And so what we're proposing to do with providing this data intelligence system to e-commerce clients, our enterprise banking and our enterprise corporate clients, our neobank clients, let's say ports, if not if, but when we win those contracts, we'll take all that data, structure it. Remember, all of the data within our ecosystem, we benchmark against or structure according to GICS, the Global Industrial Classification Standard. And so we're building real-time indices and forecasts because we're tracking private markets.
Yep, and that's exactly makes sense. I mean, as real-time, highly reliable, massive amounts of information of what's going on in terms of the movement of goods and around the world is incredibly valuable. It goes well beyond the ability of anything we have right now. I mean, yeah, okay, I'm sure we know how many Toyota cars are on their way to the US. But putting that all in one place, and along with all the Nissans and everything else that's on its way, or the empty holds that are on the way back, that with this information, the whole world can look at. The combined product will enable the kinds of guys that like these big at the big Wall Street houses and so forth. They'll pay a lot of money for this stuff, for this information. This is gold, and it isn't as sexy sounding as some of the stuff like spaceships and stuff, but I got to tell you, I mean, being an as he said, an ex-Wall Streeter, as he is too, it is how it is a very, very powerful thing. It is a very lucrative thing, and it's only one thing that is out there. So there's a lot. So you have to go, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I apologies, everyone that's tuned in, Khalil, Charles, but I have to jump onto another meeting now. It is 2:00 in the morning, my time of the world, but there's no rest for the weary.
Wait, now Sean is calling me.
Oh, great! Bring him on the call.
Let me see if I can.
Right.
Hang on 1 second.
Okay.
Is there any closing words you would like to, leave everyone with before you have to hop off today?
Yes, yes. I would like to underscore I have spent a little over a year building a deep, not only business relationship with Charles and AtomBeam, but also personal friendship. I have found him to be a stellar entrepreneur, someone who's gained a lot of my trust and respect as well. We are myself and Crowdpoint, the rest of the executive team and members at Crowdpoint are incredibly happy and proud to be partnering with AtomBeam on delivering this combined product. So highly we have a high level of confidence and support for not just Charles, Josh, and the rest of the team that we've gotten to know at AtomBeam. So proud to be partnered with them and excited for what's to come.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Charles. Khalil, take care.
Of course. Charles, you're on mute if you're talking.
Sorry. I got to tell you, it's always like that dealing with these guys. They're always like here, there, everywhere. I'm going to, I've got, so with some luck here, Sean will be joining us. He is the other Crowdpoint guy, and the other founder, and you know, he's pretty amazing, as I'm hoping we'll all see, you know, here in a moment. At any rate, so but Sean it can go into a little more of the tech, but he's really good at sort of like saying, here's what this really means. And so, at any rate, so I'll, you know, we'll wait his joining, but at the same time, it's some pretty amazing stuff. With this combination thing, you know, we've been talking about it and working on it for a long time, and I think everybody is going to see here what this can do. Now, if we don't hear from, if Sean can't join, as it turns out, then what we'll do is we'll reconstitute here. But let me.
You have some questions coming in.
Yeah, fire a couple of questions, and I can see if what I can do to address them.
Of course. The first question I see here is, will this webinar be recorded and available afterwards? Yes, it is. We'll be posting a webinar recap later next week. So be on the lookout for that. We'll have an email around it. So yeah, we'll have this webinar, you know, as a recap for everyone. The second question I have here is, Charles, how does the pricing for the implementation of AtomBeam's compaction tech work?
Oh, good question. So yeah, so what we're, you know, it's a really good question. And, you know, the answer to it is not as simple as we would love, because somebody might be using it for an entirely different purpose, an entirely different situation. You can't charge the same thing to someone putting it onto an aircraft to send data to the ground as you're going to charge to somebody sending data from one of 2,000 sensors in a smart building. And so what we do pretty much is we try to make it as simple as possible. So, and the other thing is, because we like to operate through partners whenever possible, such as, for example, Crosser, which is a partner of ours, or Cribble, another partner of ours, they incorporate us into their tech, but they also, and Inmarsat, that's another, those all will put us onto their bill. And so generally speaking, what we try to do is capture something like 10%, if we're talking about savings in the amount of cost of transmission, somewhere between 10 and 20% of the amount of data, amount of savings that they're going to get. So if they're going to save, you know, $100, then we'll charge 10. If they're going to, or 10 to 15 to 20. If they're going to save 1,000, you know, then maybe we get to 100 or something. It gets harder when you get the bigger numbers. So anyway, now I think we're getting although he's using my link, so it says me. Sean. Sean, are you there?
I am. Good morning or good afternoon, whatever time it is there.
Good. Yeah. So yeah, Sean is kind enough to join us. I think he's in Egypt, right?
I'm in Cairo today. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so Sean, we had a nice chat with Nitty earlier, and he walked us through some of the, some of the implications of the combined tech. You are really good at sort of laying out, here's like the grand vision, and why this is such a profound, important thing. Would you please like jump in and just give us, your take on it as well, please?
Yeah, sure. One of the most powerful things that we've seen in the explosion of data in the past 20 years is that there's been an explosion of data. The problem is, how do you get access to the data, and how do you make sure it's immutable and transparent and also protect it? It's one thing just to make it that people can see it. That's another thing to protect it and keep it immutable. That's a real important thing. When you build a blockchain that actually is a database that has all the same features, functions that you might see with a traditional database, only a little bit more, it becomes a game changer. And the reason why is because you've essentially figured out a way where you can all have the same database, but but you can have what you determine to be plural first. But when you think about it, when you have that kind of capability, you now have an opportunity. What does that do for API? Well, it pretty much changes the game, because if we all are working off the same record, but I only have access to some parts of the record that might be confidential. Everybody,
You're getting hard to hear, Sean. Sorry. Sean.
relationship or e-com transaction. I have a commerce transaction.
Sean, sorry. Sean, can you hear me? Nah,
Awesome.
this isn't working. I think we have to try again here. Sean? Well, I'm sure we've all had these kinds of experiences. I think what we need to do here is what we really should do here is reconstitute this webinar, because it got a little discombobulated because of the travel, but these two guys all of a sudden had to jump on airplanes and fly over the world, and so it became a little more challenging. I would also say that I've seen several questions in the chat, in the Q&A about the business model, about revenue sharing, about that kind of thing. I will tell you that we're in the middle of those discussions right now. And we are, I can't tell you that we have a really crystal clear, here's how we're doing it thing. And part of it is because these guys have banking licenses. And so some of their revenue comes from banking unrelated to us. Some of it is purely from the blockchain that is related to us. And so we're sorting that out right now. And I will tell you that I have a very, very positive relationship with these guys, a high trust relationship. And whatever we finally agree on, and it's not that we haven't talked about it and have, but generally we've been very fair with each other. And I think, things, when you can't figure something out, you split it in half, that kind of thing. So I can't really address substantively the business model part of this, but I will tell you, these guys are on fire. They're running all over the place. It's very exciting. Another thing I see in the chat here is, I'm sorry, in the Q&A is the the Lockheed question, that just got cranked up to, literally in the last like few days. Bottom line is what it is right now is they're supporting us in a proposal to DoD. And they've jumped in, they volunteered it. They are excited as hell about our stuff. And they think there's all sorts of applications for all sorts of things that they do. So that, again, early days, it will come down to, they're not asking for anything from us. They're looking at backing us up right now. And we ultimately will sit down and we'll come up with something. They're going to want to use it, they think, in various things that they're doing. They do a lot of satellite work, a lot of tactical data stuff, and all of that applies. So there's a lot of work that we're going to be looking at with those guys in the future. Sean, you're back.
Yep, great. Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're much better.
About that.
So
what I was saying
one thing
is
to talk about that I tried to is this whole thing with this individualized access to information, the implications of it. And I talked about how, the analogy you said, okay, I want to buy a drink and I get to be carded and I hold up my thing and I get a green check. I described that. So maybe just give us a little more like, this is how this impacts the world.
Yeah, definitely. The biggest thing about a blockchain that actually operates like a database, one of the biggest things is, when I talk with people, they don't understand that the current blockchains are not databases, Charles. No, they're just, in fact, given your and I's background, when I first heard about the blockchain, knowing what we did over there in the intelligence community, I was like, oh, they're just building a cryptographic hash that represents a large amounts of data. Finally, someone else caught up with us. We were trying to move gigabytes of data from the edge on satellite communications for both combat and clandestine operations. These guys figured it out. Cool on them, good on them. They figured out what we've been doing for years. And then I saw the blockchain, and that wasn't the case at all. It was like junior varsity showed up. So what's really powerful when you basically take a transaction, let's use a simple one, and then we'll get into some more fun derivations. I buy something online, and let's say I buy a lab kit. I'm buying a lab kit that's got medical implications. So my first name, middle name, last name, my SKU of the product, I've got my address, I got where it's being shipped, all that information, and then it gets shipped. I take the lab test, I update my data that I've sent in. It's on its way back. The actual project, the actual lab test I'm sending back is tracked. It gets submitted. It shows up. The lab test results come back. All of that is transparent. You can see it all on the blockchain. Everything. Well, Sean, that doesn't sound like a very good idea. Here's where it gets real cool with AtomBeam. What happens is you compact the information that you want people to see, but you assign the code words and code books in a manner such that you have different levels of qualification to see the data. So traditionally in defense context, that would be, here's what I've got with unclass. Here's my unclassified network, right? That's your NIPRNet. Then you've got SIPRNet, which is your secret. And then you got JWIX, it goes to the top secret. Well, now all of a sudden what you've got is it becomes, I tell people Karl Marx was a horrible person when it came to figuring out how to run a society, but he should have been the world's first technologist, from each according to their abilities, to each according to their needs. So everybody's from their capabilities contributing data to a global database, but you only can reach the data that's based upon your needs and your permission. And so now this is a monumental game changer, because what that means is you've got all these disparate data sets that are sitting out there. You can run analytics on those data sets, and this is where the big idea happens. The big idea is super crazy. What you've got is, there's a simple equation we used when we were doing open source intelligence. Data plus value equals information. 99% of the planet don't understand that data is just data. My plane ticket back to the United States right now is data. It doesn't meet 4 criteria that we would use in counterintelligence, which is spatially where it's happening, Temporally, when do we think it's going to happen? Thematically, what's the theme of the actual threat? And semantically, how does our enemy define that threat? Well, that same use can be applied for anything when it comes to data, which is, it becomes real simple. Spatially, where's this supposed to happen? Temporally, when's it supposed to happen? Thematically, what airline am I taking? Semantically, why is that important to me based upon what gate number? So all of a sudden, that same rule of thumb can be applied over and over to data. So when you've got this model whereby you're able to create this global database, here's what's really powerful about it. You're actually displaying the entire database, all of the records inside the blockchain. In other words, when you actually run the data, the entire data set is in the payload. What makes our blockchain really mind-boggling is, Khalil, have you ever seen a JSON file?
No, I have not.
What makes a JSON file so powerful is it's not only human readable, but it's machine readable as well. So that's what's made companies like MongoDB go to a $12 billion market cap, because what it does is it does some things really, really interesting. One, it abstracts the data out of traditional relational database. You know what a relational database is. It's Microsoft Excel is a relational database, right? It's rows and columns, right? What it's done is it's abstracted each one of those records into a semantic join. They mean something. And then you can create relationships between those semantic joins. Well, here's what's crazy. Imagine 1 million blocks, 1 billion blocks, all interconnected through some kind of deterministic consensus. And that means they talk to each other in real time. It's almost like a molecular model, right? In fact, what's really interesting, Khalil, is our blockchain splits like cellular mitosis. Now imagine each one of those blocks has a payload, like you'd have a payload on an airplane or a payload in the trunk of your car. And each one of those is containing data that's in the form of a JSON. Here's where it gets mind-boggling. It could be an incredibly long row, up to 20 megabytes of data in that, but it's compacted. It's in a compacted state. So now it's in a really small state. So then here comes the Karl Marx, from each according to their abilities. Well, here's what I'm able to put in based on how I'm contributing to this data, whether I'm in the supply chain enriching it, whether I'm the one that actually generated it, to each according to their needs. What code book do I have? If I have the right code book, I can see it all. If I don't have the right code book, I can see what's been allocated to me. This is the part that, if you hear me getting exciting, is mind-boggling. I just got rid of entire armies of database administrators. I got rid of all these database security guys. I got rid of DevOps. I just absolutely eclipsed the entire database industry in a nanosecond. Then on top of that, I've created a hierarchical model with AtomBeam such that I could literally, I was telling this to my friend in the intelligence community here in Cairo today. I said, we could build you a blockchain database with your Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, and you could give the IP address way to the Chinese and say, shishia, good luck. That's how powerful this is. If you get my excitement, it's because, for me, my background is I started falling out of airplanes. I was an infantryman, I was a ranger, and I got into tech 20 years ago, and this is such a complete. It's like taking the tech world and flipping it over, not on its side once, but flipping it back over again and again about 20 times. It's redefining the global market, because what you've got in our partnership CrowdBeam is you've got the ability to publish any data, anytime, anywhere with such fidelity, but unless you have the right code book and code word, you can't see it. And oh, by the way, that blockchain that everybody thinks is great, built by an 18-year-old kid. Heck, I didn't know how to kiss a woman at 18-year-old. How could you build a blockchain, right? Like, this takes that block, and those blocks can barely get a megabyte of data in them. We can put 20 megabytes of data in it. So now what you've got is universality in a database per block that splits out like cellular mitosis, where the block sits and goes, oh, I have too many people accessing me. Oh my goodness. I know what I'll do is I'll split to create more capacity and go to another
go to another computer so I'm more accessible. Oh, you know what? I'm getting too much data. I'll split again and append this one JSON to connect to another JSON. So I have a relationship between these two objects, all in a compacted state. All you have to do is the hard work is determine which row of your JSON do you want to give who and what and when access. In fact, using a code book, I can say the only time you see this, think what it does for like financial markets. Like now I'm saying that at certain times around the world, this commodity data can only be seen at 12 GMT. That's all put into the code books. It's redefining. So not only do I have case-based access to data, I have individual access to data based upon your role. I have a role-based and case-based all in the same environment. That's why this joint venture is literally for the IC, this guy from the intelligence community today was like, his jaw dropped. And then I showed it to him. And then he called all his technical analysts over and they're like, and the guy's sitting there doing it. And one in the corner, I give him the IP address because I don't care. I don't care. And the analyst comes back and goes, this is north of 1 million transactions per second. How did you do this? I said, that I'm not going to tell you. That I'm not going to tell you. So that's why Charles and I are so tied at the hip with this. So I hope that through the excitement, did it germinate and kind of land where you see the power of what we're doing?
It does, and it really showed that excitement, which it's definitely a great thing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fun.
So
Where are you from originally?
I'm Lebanese.
I was trying because your facial features. I was wondering, you're Lebanese or Moroccan, so I couldn't figure it out. Say waha for me. Can you say waha?
Waha?
There he is. Okay, he's Lebanese. Yeah.
Hey,
You
Sean,
didn't have enough
so-
ha for Moroccan.
Sean, I gotta get a few questions in here from the chat that you can answer. One is a question. Can you please describe? I'm sorry. I already talked about that. Deep fakes. Can we do anything about deep fakes? Another thing is someone follows here. I'm trying to find it, but he said he follows crypto closely and he doesn't know anything about Crowdpoint. And anyway, take those and I'll mention anything else.
Yeah, so I'll go backwards. Yeah, you probably wouldn't. We don't consider self, although we use a cryptographic hash, like other people do. We're not a crypto company. We're a digital asset company. Part of the reason why you don't see us in crypto is number one, we're SEC filed and SEC registered. Our blockchain and our units are actually SEC registered. So we went the cumbersome, boring, really boring and hard SEC route where we become registered. You can actually look us up in Edgar's. You can go to the SEC and type in Crowdpoint, and you'll see us listed in Edgar's. If you want to see what our utility token looks like, you can go to crowdunit.com. It's spelled differently. It's like the symbol CRWD. So crwdunit.com, and you can read all about it. The white paper's up there. You can see our SEC filed utility token. Let's talk about deep fakes. So for those of you sitting around, what does that mean? When you look at
2 minutes to go.
fakes,
2 minutes to go. So just
2 minutes. So deep fakes is when people can create a synthetic media or synthetic content, which existing data or an image can be replaced with someone else's. Well, you can certainly, when it comes to a blockchain, especially ours, the data is immutable as well as being intransparent. So you can't pull a Twitter and have a database administrator go in there and change stuff on the back end, which, we're now finding out what's going on. This is an immutable and transparent database. Now, if you make a mistake to that database, you can append it, but then you get what's called chain of custody. So that addresses the deep fake question. I think there was a third one.
Yeah. Sean, could you please explain what a code book looks like? And is it a file that can be shared? How can you prevent a user from leaking it?
Great question. So first of all, what I love about what CrowdBeam is doing and what specifically what Charles has brought, Charles doesn't tell you his background, but he comes from naval intelligence. And so in the intelligence community, what you learn is a lot of stuff that goes all the way back all the way back to like Byzantine and even further about how Charles and I can have a conversation. Like right now, 90% of the room, 99% of the room doesn't know that Charles and I could be having a conversation, but the construct of how I chose a few sentences, he and I could have had an entire secondary conversation with no one on this call even knowing it. That's the power of compaction. That's how it works. You're the only one that generates that particular mechanism for which you're going to create an encryption of conversation. And Charles does the same thing, but we come up with a mutual agreement, kind of like a contract between us where we can both use the same. But there are things on Charles's side I'll never know, so he can have a conversation with Khalil that only he and Khalil can know, that I would know, and I'd be sitting in the same room. The beautiful thing about compaction is you can have a conversation in plain sight and have 16 embedded conversations at the same time.
Well said.
Awesome.
And I'm afraid we're wrapping up, right, Khalil?
Yeah, we are. Well, I
Yeah,
want to thank
exciting session, of course.
It was a fun session. It was great to, it's
Rollicking, yeah.
yeah, it's okay. This is recorded. So like we mentioned earlier, this webinar, we will be having a whole recap video around it coming next week. Thank you everyone who attended today's webinar. Thank you, Sean, for hopping on and for the second half of the webinar. Thank you, Charles. This was just an amazing webinar, and I'm glad we took a deep dive into this partnership. I'm really excited to see what comes out of it. And Charles, real quick before we bounce off, do you want to kind of just talk a little bit about the crowdfunding campaign and where?
Sure. Yeah. Yep. So we are seen to be really getting some good momentum, and I appreciate that. I think that, as some of the and it's, I think, based on real stuff. I mean, we're really in there getting people, getting big companies moving forward to use us. Saab is putting us in aircraft really now, and we have other major companies out there in various stages of either testing, using, working with us to use them, and so forth. And to answer Jeff Park's question about, is it, am I going to be spending, are we spending too much time working with Crowdpoint? No, Crowdpoint is working, really, we support it some, but it's almost all the work is being done by them in terms of the integration. They're integrating our code into their code rather than the other way around. So don't worry. So at any rate, I would say things are really cooking. So if, and I don't think it's possible to convey how big a deal this product that, this joint product that Sean and I, mainly Sean, had been talking about. It could be a big deal, to say the least.
Thank you,
So,
everyone.
At any rate, I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much. And thank you, Sean, for coming on. And thanks, Khalil, for hosting.
Of course. Have a good one.
All right. Take care. See ya.